The prison was shaking with noise. Men were yelling, metal was banging, and the whole place felt alive in the worst way. But none of that was the scariest part. The scariest part was the darkness, deep, heavy darkness that swallowed every hallway, every room, every breath. The power had gone out, and with it, the only thing keeping thousands of inmates under control. Flashlights flickered like tiny stars in a giant cave. Officers shouted orders, but their voices were drowned by the roaring chaos. Inmates were running, pushing, grabbing anything they could find to make noise or break something. It felt like the building itself was shaking. And then, out of nowhere, someone yelled from the far end of the block. "The gates are open." Every sound stopped for 1 second. Just one, but that second felt like forever. Then the noise exploded again, bigger, louder, and more dangerous. Footsteps thundered across the concrete. Men rushed toward the open gate like a wave that couldn't be stopped. Officer Daniel Brooks, trapped between the dark hallway and the rushing crowd, froze. His radio wasn't working. His flashlight was dying. And he didn't know if the other officers were still standing or already taken down. He took one slow breath. Then the emergency lights clicked on for half a second, just long enough for him to see something that made his heart jump. A group of inmates, at least 20 of them, were moving toward the control room. And they were holding something. Something that looked like. The light shut off again. Darkness swallowed everything. And then the screaming started. Hours earlier, the prison had been calm, or at least as calm as a prison could be. Riverbend Correctional Facility stood in the middle of a quiet town in Ohio. It was old, tall, and tough-looking, with stone walls and fences covered in razor wire. Nearly 2,000 inmates lived inside, along with a team of officers who tried every day to keep the peace. Officer Daniel Brooks had worked there for 9 years. He had seen fights, arguments, and small lockdowns, but nothing too big. On that day, he arrived early, holding a cup of hot coffee and feeling like it would be a normal shift. Maybe even a slow one. He was wrong. The first sign happened during morning head count. Inmates were restless, walking fast, talking in low voices, looking around too much. Daniel noticed it right away. Something was off. "Feels weird today," Officer Carter said beside him. "You see it too?" Daniel asked. "Yeah, they are moving like they are waiting for something." But nothing happened. The morning passed quietly. After breakfast, some inmates went to the yard, some went to the workshop, others stayed in their cells. Everything looked normal again. Still, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling. Later that afternoon, at around 3:17 p.m., the lights flickered once. Just once. Quick enough that most people didn't notice. But Daniel did. The power came back right away, and the officers didn't think much of it. Old buildings had problems all the time. But behind the walls, in the electrical room at the back of the prison, something else was happening. A fuse had burned out. A second fuse had overheated. And no one knew that the third fuse, the one powering the main security gates, was seconds away from failing. At 4:02 p.m., the prison yard was noisy. Dozens of inmates played basketball. Some lifted weights. Others walked around the track. 2 men sat by the far fence talking quietly. Officer Thomas watched from the tower and noticed those 2 men had been talking for an hour. He made a note in his log book but didn't call it in. It didn't look dangerous. At 4:06 p.m., the kitchen called over the radio. "Power flicker in Section C. Everything seems fine now, but the ovens stopped for a minute. Maintenance checked. Nothing unusual. But deep underneath the building, the final fuse was melting." At 4:10 p.m., Daniel was standing in B block talking to an inmate named Marcus Lane. Marcus wasn't a bad guy. He was loud, but usually harmless. Today, he was unusually quiet. "You okay?" Daniel asked. Marcus nodded slowly. "You ever feel like something big is about to happen? Like everyone's waiting for the same moment?" Daniel frowned. "What moment?" Marcus shrugged. "Guess we'll find out." Before Daniel could ask anything else, the lights flickered again. This time, they stayed off for a full 3 seconds. That was enough for everyone to notice. Some inmates cheered. Others shouted. A few looked scared. The lights came back. Daniel felt a cold chill down his spine. At 4:12 p.m., a loud boom echoed from deep inside the building, the sound of the fuse finally exploding. And then everything went black. Total darkness. The backup generator tried to start but failed. Emergency lights blinked twice, then died. Doors that were supposed to lock stayed unlocked. Alarms that were supposed to ring stayed silent. The entire prison was blind. "What's happening?" someone yelled. "Stay calm," an officer shouted. But there was no calm. Inmates started moving fast, too fast. Officers tried to control the crowd, but without lights, without radios, without barriers, it was almost impossible. Some inmates pushed open the gates. Some ran into hallways they weren't allowed in. Some just panicked. A heavy crash echoed through the building, a table being thrown, metal hitting metal. More yelling. More footsteps. And then someone shouted the words that changed everything. "The gates are open." That was when the prison turned into a nightmare. The noise wasn't just loud, it was wild. Daniel tried to reach the control room, but the hallway was packed. Inmates were yelling things he couldn't understand. Someone pushed him. Someone else ran past him. His flashlight flickered weakly. Then the emergency lights came on for half a second, just long enough for him to see a group of inmates carrying something large, wrapped in dark cloth. They moved fast toward the control room. The light shut off again. Everything went quiet. Too quiet. Then someone screamed, a sharp, panicked scream from inside the control room. Daniel froze. He didn't know what the inmates were carrying. He didn't know if the officers inside were hurt. He didn't know if reinforcements were coming. He only knew one thing. He had to move. Slowly, carefully, he stepped forward into the dark hallway. But before he could take a second step, a loud, heavy bang echoed through the prison. A sound so sharp and powerful that the entire building shook. And someone, hit the floor right in front of him. For a moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. The body that had fallen in front of him wasn't moving. His hands shook as he lowered his dying flashlight toward the floor, hoping, praying, that the emergency lights would flicker again. They didn't. The prison was still drowned in darkness. He knelt beside the body, heart pounding so hard it hurt. He reached out and touched the shoulder. The shirt was rough, prison fabric. It was an inmate, not an officer. The man let out a low groan, telling Daniel he was alive, but barely. "Hey," Daniel whispered. "What happened? Talk to me." No answer. Only another groan. Before Daniel could do anything else, a heavy crash echoed somewhere behind him, this one louder, deeper, almost like metal bending under pressure. Then another scream cut through the hallway, sharp and terrified. And then, running. Fast running. Multiple footsteps. Getting closer. Daniel stood up, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. He raised it, even though it barely glowed. The footsteps grew louder, too loud to be officers. Too wild. Too chaotic. He backed into the wall, breathing quietly. A shadow darted past the far end of the hall. Then another. Voices followed, harsh and angry. "Find the door. It's this way. Hurry up, before the lights come back." Daniel's stomach twisted. They weren't random inmates. They were organized. They knew exactly where they were going. The control room. The place that controlled every lock, every door, every alarm. If they got in there and learned how to use it. No, he couldn't let that happen. He stepped over the injured inmate and moved fast, staying close to the wall so nobody could grab him in the dark. The air felt thick with panic. It was hot, sweaty, and smelled like fear. Every sound seemed louder in the darkness. The breathing, the footsteps, the metal clanking, the distant yelling. Halfway down the hallway, Daniel stopped. The control room door was open halfway, but something was blocking it from fully closing. Something on the floor. No, someone. He crouched down, fingers shaking as he searched for a pulse on the officer lying there. A few seconds later, he found it. Weak. Too weak. "Officer Harris," Daniel whispered, recognizing the man. "Stay with me. Stay awake." Harris's voice was barely a breath. "Daniel, don't let them in." "I won't," Daniel whispered. But he could already hear them coming. Their footsteps were pounding like drums. He grabbed Harris by the shoulders and dragged him inside the control room. It was pitch black, but Daniel knew the layout from memory. He'd worked here for years. The console, the screens, the switches, all dead in the darkness. Except a tiny blinking light in the far corner. The backup override panel. It had its own battery. Small, but enough to lock down one section of the prison. Not the whole prison, but one section might save someone's life. Maybe his. Daniel rushed to the panel and hit the button. A loud mechanical clank echoed through the hallway as the heavy gate outside began to slide shut. Slowly. Too slowly. He could hear the inmates running toward him. "Hey," one of them yelled. "The door's closing. Stop it." They started sprinting. Daniel kept pressing the button over and over, even though it wouldn't make the gate move faster. The metal gate groaned as it lowered. 5 feet. 4 feet. 3. The first inmate reached the gate and tried to duck under it. Daniel slammed the emergency override. The gate dropped faster, crashing down so hard the inmate jumped back just in time. Sparks flew as the metal slammed into the floor, sealing the hallway. For now, the men on the other side banged on it with everything they had. Open it. You can't hide forever. You think that door's gonna save you. The metal shook with every punch and kick. Daniel backed away, breathing hard. His hands were trembling, and his heartbeat felt like thunder. But he couldn't rest, not yet. The control room wasn't safe. If those men found another way around, he'd be trapped. He checked on Officer Harris again. The man was fading, his breathing ragged. Hang on, Daniel whispered. I'll get you help. But how? The radios were dead. The lights were dead. The backup power was barely working. He could try to make it to the main generator room, but that meant going deeper into the DAC, where the chaos was worst. He took a deep breath and made his choice. He had to leave the control room. He had to get the power back. Daniel lifted Harris as gently as he could and laid him behind the control panel, the safest place in the room. I'll come back, he said. I promise. He wasn't sure if Harris heard him. He wasn't even sure if Harris was still awake. Daniel walked to the back door of the control room, the one officers used to move between blocks without using the main hallways. It opened quietly with a soft click. Beyond it was another hallway. Silent. Too silent. He stepped into it, flashlight flickering. A few feet ahead, he saw something that made every muscle in his body freeze. Bloody footprints. Fresh ones. Going deeper into the darkness. And not just one set. At least 7. Maybe more. He stared at them, his breath trapped in his throat. Before he could move, before he could even think, the entire prison echoed with a new sound. A long, deep alarm. Not the usual alarm. This one was different. It was the breaker alarm, the warning that the generator wasn't just off. It was overheating. If the generator overheated fully, the whole building could catch fire. Or explode. Daniel stepped backward, heart racing fast enough to hurt. He wasn't the only one who heard it. At the end of the hall, in the deep darkness, a voice whispered. He knows. Daniel stiffened. The voice came again, closer this time. His coming. Daniel's flashlight flickered. Once. Twice. Then died completely. He was alone in total darkness. And the footsteps were coming toward him.